Okay, so we're back with another one of our costume prop weapon builds. This time we're going to make a kind of a post-apocalyptic Kyoketsu-Shoge type of weapon with these little parts that I scrounged up. So let's get started. Okay, well, the first thing I had to do was put the pipe in a vise and kind of squeeze it, flatten it out a little bit, so that I'll be able to stick the end of this knife blade down inside the pipe just like that. And I'm going to go ahead and tap that in there and take that slack up there. This blade is off of one of those old 1980s Rambo knives, and I've actually had this since about 85. They were cheap knives, came with a plastic handle, piece of junk, so we're going to use it for this project. Okay, well, you can see slip together and fit into place. That blade, no gap there between the handle and the blade. And this is actually probably a better blade than this knife ever had to begin with. Anyhow, I'm going to go ahead and put a hole in there, run that bolt through there. I'm sure you noticed that hole in the tang of the blade, and I'm going to secure that in place. Okay, there we go. We got that hole drilled out. Matched the hole in the tang, that existing hole in the tang there. So straight through, perfect. I'll be able to go ahead and slip that bolt through there and secure that in place so I don't have any worries about that blade coming out of that handle. And as I said earlier, this is probably the way better handle than this knife ever expected to have on it. You can see I went ahead and bolted that in place. I put a couple little lock washers in there just to take up the gap that I had. But yeah, it actually fits in the hand pretty well, even though it's not what it's going to be used for primarily. But all in all, just as a rebuild on a super cheap knife, it's actually not half bad. So let's go ahead and move on with this project. Okay, so I got my end cap. I went ahead and drilled a hole in it, and I'll be using this screw eye here. It's going to go in through the end, and I'll be securing it in place with a small nut on the outside and another nut on the inside. Keep it locked into place, and then the whole thing will be screwed right on the end of the knife handle there. And I just wanted to show you this real quick. See, if you don't put a nut on the outside of that screw eye, you're going to have a lot of play in that ring there. See, it's going to be real loose, kind of be flopping around there, and that's not exactly what I'm looking for this. I want to secure that in place, so I'll be putting a nut on the outside of that screw eye. Okay, so I've got the nut on the outside. That's secured in place. There's actually two nuts locked on the inside of that cap, and then I screwed that cap in place with a pipe wrench, so it's not going anywhere. So that's the basic construction of the blade part of this weapon. That's all done. Now to attach it to some chain. Okay, for demonstration purposes only, here I've got it locked onto a short length of chain right now. You can kind of see the basic concept of what I'm going for here, but eventually it's going to be attached to a much longer section of chain as soon as I can dig some up around here someplace. So let's go ahead and see if I can find that other piece of chain and do some detail work on this. Okay, so another little shot, just proof of concept here. I'm going to be using that ring there on the very end of my longer chain when I finally get around to that. So, but even as just a regular handheld weapon, you can see where that might be fun to play with. And here we are at the target board. Little proof of concept there to show you that this thing actually does hold up to use. Well, I finally found my longer piece of chain. You can see where I had that larger ring there on the end, and you can see the length of chain that I'm going to be working with, making the entire weapon slightly over 7 feet long. Pretty cool. And that's it. That's the basic design. You know, she's all painted up now. Go ahead and drape that over your shoulder, and you got a nice prop for your next movie, or weapon if you need one.